Ruve Gaura Chandraya Radhikaya Tadali Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tada Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpaturviyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Shri Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dandavat Pranam devotees, all glories to the lotus feet of my Guru Padma Nitya Lila Praveshtam Vishnu Pada Paramahansasto Tarasata Sisimad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. The lotus feet of my Param Guru Dev Nitya Lila Praveshtam Vishnu Pada Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sisimad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada. And also, Nityalila Praveshtam Vishnu Pada Paramahansa Stotara Sisimad Acharya Keshri Srila Bhakti Pragan Keshri Goswami Maharaj Arupanuga Guru Varga. Also, my Dandavat Pranam on to devotees, any Sannyasigan, Prabhus, Didis. So, I am speaking on something that I've spoken on before. And as usual, I'm trying to keep it brief, but at the same time, I hope to, in brevity, get across the point that I'm trying to make. I listen to a class, as I normally do, from various places, including today. I listen to a class. I don't name sources of where I hear the classes, because I'm not speaking for a matter of any kind of negative criticism about the classes or the places where the classes are generated from. I'm just addressing certain points, and I hope that's also very clear. But what I heard, it was not pleasing for me, and I'm insignificant. Therefore, my pleasure is not something that's of paramount consideration in what I'm about to say. I'm only mentioning it because, perhaps others in hearing the context of what I'm speaking about may also not be pleased, and I don't want that to generate negative energy that then turns into negative criticism, so to speak, of persons or personalities, which I wouldn't name anyway, but not even bad thoughts, but just to maybe take sedantically what I'm saying and apply it if you have faith and if you accept that what I'm saying sedantically is correct. If not, then that discussion can be had. But the class was essentially regarding Dhruva Charit, but perhaps there was a prior arrangement for the discussion of certain contemporary issues to come about. And in this case, the contemporary issue was the statements, especially what statements some people consider controversial in the books of our Srila Prabhupada, and perhaps statements which have also come from morning walks or room conversations, etc., etc. And generally they fall into various categories which are socially sensitive, whether it deals with things regarding women, whether it deals with things regarding African American community or African community, or whether it deals with things regarding the alternative sexual community. People have begun to examine all of these statements and started to look at them through the lens, especially of the contemporary social dynamics. So I think I've spoken before that there are some considerations about how we allow the influence of social dynamics, and in many cases the social dynamics we experience also have social engineering behind them, how we allow that to infiltrate the realm of bhakti. It is very difficult now, in the absence of the insulation, as I mentioned before, of ashram life in many cases, to really be reinforced by the atmosphere of the strength of sadhana bhakti. And now you find that there's so much infiltration, conflation of so many material and mundane sociological ideas that have crept into the theology and philosophy of bhakti. And in many cases, some validation is attempted for some of these things based on individual academic achievement. Well, I'm stating this from the position of being a PhD in this, or having a bachelor's degree in this, or having attended this university, or having studied under this academic arrangement or that academic arrangement. So first of all, I am not at all condemning a person's academic pursuits, academic achievements. I went to college, right? So I'm not condemning any of those things. But at the same time, the Siddhanta, theology, and philosophy of bhakti is not subject to the scrutiny of unrealized persons. And please, I'm begging that this doesn't be misconstrued as individual attacking. I'm speaking generically here. That bhakti is not the subject matter of scrutiny based on the academic acknowledgement of whatever you've done as far as school is concerned. Because if a person has a BS in BS or a PhD, which is equated with the philosophy of hogs and dogs if it's not applied to the modality of seva, then it's not a accepted ideal that simply having a degree or simply having an academic standing is basis under which to evaluate the teachings, behavior of realized Sudha Vaishnavas. Now, there's a whole nother question, which maybe another video might have to be done on, exactly what it means to be a Sudha Vaishnava or pure Vaishnava, right? But certainly, you cannot stand on the platform. You cannot stand on the platform of the idea that simply having a acknowledgement from some academic institution is sufficient to have authority to try to couch, speculate, conjecture the framework under which pure Vaishnavas or pure devotees work. Srila Narottam Das Thakur was very pointed in saying, Vaishnavera Kriya Mudra Vijnanena Bhujaya. Entrance into the depth of the mind and heart of pure Vaishnavas is very difficult. And therefore our position is always a position of service to pure Vaishnavas. Again, who and what is a pure Vaishnava? That's a separate discussion. Because sociological consensus on who's a pure Vaishnava is not the same thing as who's actually a pure Vaishnava. Now, what I heard discussed today was some various opinions, various conjectures, various outlooks on some of the statements of Srila Prabhupada regarding the categories I mentioned, whether it was women, alternative sexuality, or racial issues. So first of all, in general, you cannot bypass the very premise on which the information is being given, go to the information, relatively take it out of its context, and start to examine it, deal with it, and look at it, etc. So first of all, the foundational platform, and I even heard a question arise as to perhaps it appearing to be a spiritual bypass to state that in fact we're not the body. But the reality is bhakti is a process of reality and experiential growth. It is not an intellectual exercise in massaging the false ego and identification with the body. It's not. So the idea that a person believes it is spiritual bypassing to bring up the idea we're not the body, when that is the foundational premise under which bhakti is experienced and realized, is absurd. So, obviously, Srila Prabhupada and all of Srila Prabhupada's teachings have basis and are premised in the idea that we're not the body. So whatever statements are made by Srila Prabhupada are addressing two categories, material and spiritual. Why address the material? Because by understanding the material, just as Sri Ishopanishad mentions, learning nescience and science, in this case science meaning the science of reality or spiritual life, addressing them side by side is important. So Srila Prabhupada brings up analysis of material situations, material dynamics, and points out their faults. Now, someone might say, well, listen, does that necessitate direct statements about racial groups? I'm going to take that example first. Well, is Srila Prabhupada actually addressing persons? Meaning, is he addressing the soul? Or is he addressing a sociological phenomenon observed in a certain racial dynamic, and in this case, maybe at a particular time, in a particular historical context? Is he addressing that, or is he addressing all of those persons? Because they're the soul. They're not those bodies. Their existence in those bodies is in fact temporal, karmic, and really essentially has nothing to do with them. Therefore, the only way to take umbrage, to take exception, to have a deep consideration about feeling one way or another about it, is based on the identification we have with that temporal karmic experience. That's fact. Now, if somebody's saying, well, listen, Mukunda, we are looking at the social impact in the climate we're in terms of preaching and utilizing the books for spreading Krishna consciousness, you can have those discussions all day long. They're not wrong discussions. How we best serve our Guru Parampara by looking at how to best adjust things to try to get bhakti distributed to the masses of people. And therefore, analysis of presentation may come up. But in the long run, we have to look at the fact that the onus is on us to be able to expertly make the presentation and make it understood what was being presented was not personal. Because you are not that body. That's not a spiritual bypass. That is a spiritual fact. It is not a bypass. And if you want to talk about social inequality, social justice, that's another discussion. That's a different dynamic, a different discussion. And it can't be conflated with what is the teaching in bhakti, nor what are the statements of Srila Prabhupada regarding analysis of the faults inherent in material existence. And in material existence, not only in one racial group, but in all racial groups. Srila Prabhupada did not in particularly single out, for instance, the African American community. If you look at Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, chapter 4, you go to verse number 18. This verse is quoted. Kirat hundrando pulinda pukalsha, abir sumba yavanha kashodaya, ye chapapa yat apasraya asrayaha, sudyanti tasmai prabhavishnave namaha. You look at this verse, and you look at the purport to this verse. Here, Srila Prabhupada goes through almost the entire racial makeup of the planet, pointing out material faults of the non-Vedic practices within those racial groups. Was Srila Prabhupada individually criticizing the entire racial makeup of the world, or was he pointing out the faults inherent in material, non-spiritual culture? And is it a fact that within every single racial dynamic that there is some fault in non-spiritual factors within that culture, within that racial dynamic or cultural group? Certainly there are. Certainly there are. So to try to make a case under the current socially engineered, racially charged social dynamic, to try to now analyze Srila Prabhupada's statements in the same way we would the mundane activities and statements of regular people who have racist tendencies and so forth and so on, and maybe obviously nobody's saying that directly about Srila Prabhupada, but the indications then to try to make adjustments, well, a pure devotee is perfect spiritually, but maybe not materially. Nonsense. Nonsense. Or your personal opinion. But you don't find any Sastra Praman for this. You don't find any Sastra Praman. You find Sastra Praman that you sing every single day, that the Guru, perfect pure devotee, is Sakshaharitva. Means he's almost directly like Bhagavan. Therefore, if Guru, true Guru, if they have the possibility of being imperfect in some way, so does Bhagavan. So does Krishna. So we now start to analyze Krishna's activities to find where there is some issues. We have to start to look from the actual dynamics and the contextual reality that is being analyzed in the writings, teachings, and everything else of Srila Prabhupada. There are two dynamics, material and spiritual. On the spiritual side, to give the reality of what is spirituality, what is spiritual practice, what is spiritual attainment, what is the reality of the ultimate attainment of spirituality, Srila Prabhupada has directly written and spoken about those things. He's also looked side by side at the material anomalies and all of the problems inherent in material existence in every single grouping, racially, gender-wise, in terms of sexual orientation. He's looked at all of it and the faults inherent in it. So if you have personal identification with any particular temporal karmic package that you're in, and it intersects with that group, and you have a problem with the fact that Srila Prabhupada addressed the faults in that particular social grouping, you need to take a deeper look at your practice of bhakti. And I'm sorry for being frank about that. And then I'm not sorry as well. And I'm probably allowing my, probably the mood under which, and again, I am not blaming, because I think it was a discussion context. And I think in that discussion, people genuinely brought forth what they felt, what they understood, and I'm not criticizing or condemning that. But I'm condemning, and I'm probably putting up a very stern wall against the continuum that is a fact of the conflation and infiltration of mundane social dynamics and social engineering into the Vaishnava Mandal. And it's happening. And it happens because, one, perhaps there is a lack of recognition of what is absolutely a pure devotee. And perhaps by consensus pure devotion or consensus acceptance of who's a pure devotee, and those persons not being the wall of blockage properly of allowing these sort of opposite-dantic and misconceptions to filter in, they're not serving those who are following them. They're not genuinely serving those who are looking for answers. It is the duty of leadership to step up and say, no, listen, let's be clear. Let's see what's happening. Let's look at Siddhanta. Let's look at the philosophy. But we're even to a point now where the philosophy can be shelved in favor of subjective and relative opinion, because we have to equally value subjective and relative opinion, and we may have to move aside, or we may have to adjust even the absolute facts in order to accommodate it. So leadership means to step up and say, just as our Jiva Goswami Pad, by writing the philosophical writings that he wrote, especially the Sandarbhas, he created a wall of Siddhantic protection around the teachings of Mahaprabhu. We are obliged, if we are followers in the line of our Goswamis coming down to our Srila Prabhupada, we are obliged to stand in the gap where there is one and block out the infiltration of the influences of Kali. Because this is what this is. If you can conjecture that pure devotees' perfection is subjective to different states of their function, this is Maya. That's plain and simple. Because there is no sastric reference for that. And conjectured inferences of one is, you can't substantiate it. You cannot substantiate it. So, first of all, again, make the clear definition that Srila Prabhupada's discussion on anything which dealt with the material world was, first of all, universal in its approach. He approached the faults that were observable in any given social dynamic, and even if it's at a particular time. Because Srila Prabhupada was not here to go through the entire history analysis of individual material social dynamics. Right? Srila Prabhupada did not say, well, you know, comparative to the Ghana Empire, Mali Empire, Timbuktu, etc., what's happened to the African American, especially in the diaspora, an analysis of slavery, analysis of the injustices performed during the Jim Crow periods and this and that, and this is, that was not what Srila Prabhupada was doing. He was pointing out trait characteristics observable at a particular time in a particular social dynamic. And he did that with everybody. Look at this verse. Again, 2nd Canto, chapter 4, verse 18. You look at it, where he describes, if he, for instance, says that women are less intelligent, how much more less intelligent must men be to then succumb to becoming so sensually absorbed that they then give up everything and chase after women. Srila Prabhupada has also written things like that. Srila Prabhupada simultaneously has glorified women like Kunti, Sita Devi, right? So many cases where there's glorification of women. So you have to look at this actually as it is, not through the lens of the socially engineered dynamics, which are now in fact meant, even factually speaking, I don't even know if there's a good social analysis that goes on when people do these things. Because if you really look at what's happening, people are being socially engineered for division on the basis of race, gender, sexual orientation, all these things. They're being socially engineered to be divided about this. What to speak of from a spiritual perspective to now allow that to come into your considerations regarding the very person who in fact saved your life. And don't allow my emotional investment in this to be conflated with some kind of posture. Oh, well, that's just a fanaticism about that posture. No, I'm speaking, and I will debate anybody on it, facts regarding what Srila Prabhupada was speaking about. You can look at all Srila Prabhupada's writings in totality, and you will see, in general, there's a condemnation of material existence with all of its faults, and a glorification of spiritual reality with all its glory. That's the actual contextual basis under which all the discussions of Srila Prabhupada went on. That's his perfection. His perfection was he separated the two things clearly. And he gave the understanding that for you to really grasp what he was doing, you needed to start with the foundational principle, you are not the body. And if you buy into your temporal karmic package, then you are going to be subject to the disturbances of consciousness which come from your vicarious identification with all these situations, including now possibly having a critique or criticism of Sudha Vaishnavas. Not only Sudha Vaishnavas, Nitya associates of Bhagavan. So now, everything in summary. Srila Prabhupada's entire presentation, had basically two categories. One was an analysis and a look at the material world. And Srila Prabhupada viewed the material world as an energy of Bhagavan. He viewed the participation of the souls with material natures as a temporal condition that they were experiencing. The same person that is perhaps feeling a pinch about the description of African Americans, perhaps was European in a previous life and perhaps will be Japanese or Oriental or Asian in the next life. That very person. And what are we speaking about as a lifespan? If it's 100 years compared to eternity, it is a drop in the bucket. So it is symptomatic of the presence still of the illusory energy that you could feel anything about the general presentation or even direct statement regarding the material world and the soul's interaction with it versus Srila Prabhupada's clear statements about the need to get out of the material platform, out of the material consciousness, and establish yourself in the soul. Show me one place in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Upadeshamrita, Shri Ishopanishad, teachings of self-realization, science of self-realization. Show me one place where Srila Prabhupada gave negative conversations about the soul. Show me one. The soul is ignorant. The soul is this or the soul. No, the soul is a servant of God and has a glorious nature because he's talking about you. You're upset because he spoke about your temporal karmic package, which varies from one life to another, which I already said is like a drop in the bucket. But name one thing that he said negatively about the soul, except the soul's tendency to be influenced by ignorance. So be clear, two things were discussed. The entire material arena, inclusive of all of the faults, issues, and problems categorically within the material sphere. And he talked about the actuality of the soul and the spiritual world and the spiritual dimension and our relationship with it. If you can't make that distinction and you find social difficulty, either in being able to successfully navigate those obstacles for people who don't understand it and be able to successfully preach to them, right? Or in your own personal space, you're unable to reconcile and understand it, then hopefully this was helpful. If it's not, and maybe it wasn't because I presented it passionately, then you please apologize to you and you forgive me. If you felt any offense from this, you please forgive me for that. But I will not be I will not be passive in presentation about something like this because there's an extreme danger in the relativizing of the direct expression of Bhagavan within this world. That is Sri Guru. It is the only link the jiva in this world has to absolute reality. And if you begin to allow mundanity in the form of conflated, conjectured, and infiltrated, socially engineered ideals from the material world to start to come into the arena of Vaishnavism, and you validate it either by academic qualification or you try to validate it by your subjective feeling, then you're putting yourself in a position of the possibility of committing aparadha. And yes, even that came up in the class. And it is very possible. You cannot think that, I have carte blanche to express my opinion. Because if the opinion leans on the scale of aparadha, your bhakti could be damaged. On the other hand, if you genuinely have concern, inquiry, and you're bringing it up, and I think the forum spoke to that in a way. It was a forum to bring it up and discuss it. But we can't allow the subjective sensitivities born from our current karmic position to start to become the dominant weight on the scale of how we look at it. The facts have to remain the dominant position. Did or did not Srila Prabhupada speak about the entirety of the material world, and in many cases in a negative way? Yes. Was the purpose of that to reaffirm the fact that the individual souls really are not part of the material world, and therefore not part of the inherent faults in the material world, and to get them to take a deeper look at their actual glory, which is the position of the soul. This was the purpose, intent, and motivation. Absolutely. So, with all due respect, I'm asking that people take these things into consideration when you begin to discuss ideas about the presentation, especially of Al Srila Prabhupada. Al Srila Prabhupada, I don't have to extend any glorifications beyond what you should know already, but directly he was the fulfillment of Sriman Mahaprabhu's prophecy. Not only did Harinam spread all over the world, but the deepest conceptions of Harinam, all the way up to understanding what is Radha Dasyam, what is Mahabhav, what is Raganuga, all these things were presented by Al Srila Prabhupada. What to speak of the basic thing of saving our lives from the idea of the repeated cycle of birth and death. So please do not look on the hand that pulled you out of the ocean of birth and death with a critical eye or critiquing eye. Better you look at my own inadequacy of the ability to adjust my mind to understanding clearly what the presentations are. And don't allow your academia, don't allow your subjective intersectionality, don't allow your subjective experiences to be the weight on the scale that makes a determination about how you view what Srila Prabhupada and how Srila Prabhupada taught things. My Dandavat Pranam, all glories to our Guru Parampara, my Srila Gurudev, our Srila Prabhupada, and to all Vaishnavas, Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhavevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.